Tell me about the knives. Where did you get them?
From the drawer.
And where else? Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about it.
I got them from the dishwasher.
What kind of knives?
Big sharp ones.
And what do you want to do with those knives?
Kill John and Mommy with them, and Daddy.
It starts like a scene from a horror movie. A soft-spoken little girl looks directly at the camera and describes in chilling detail how she wants to kill her family. In the early 1990s, American television audiences were introduced to a young girl named Beth Thomas, a child whose soft voice and blank stare masked an unimaginable past. In HBO's documentary, Child of Rage, Beth calmly described how she wanted to harm animals, stab her brother, and kill her parents. The footage went viral years later, labeled as the creepiest interview ever filmed. But what most viewers didn't ask was, what happened to Beth before the cameras started rolling? And what happened after they stopped? The footage was haunting, and for many viewers, unforgettable. But beneath the shock was something far more tragic, a deeply traumatized child struggling to make sense of years of abuse. She was a child, barely 6, who had survived extreme conditions before she could even speak in full sentences. The 1990 documentary turned into a fictionalized movie in 1992 also titled Child of Rage, which presented Beth like a horror film character, complete with ominous music, close-up shots of her emotionless face, and sensationalist editing. The film Child of Rage transformed a real child into a horror icon, but Beth Thomas's story didn't end there. What came next reveals the lasting damage of sensationalized storytelling and the unsettling truth about a culture that consumes real trauma like it's just another scary movie. Details about Beth Thomas's early life remain limited, but it's widely believed she was born around 1982, somewhere in the United States. Her traumatic story began almost immediately. When Beth was just 1 year old, her biological mother died, leaving her and her infant brother Jonathan in the sole care of their father, a man who would go on to inflict unimaginable harm. For months, Beth endured horrible abuse at the hands of her father. She was often left neglected, malnourished, and exposed to violence no child should ever witness. Jonathan, a newborn at the time, was also severely mistreated. Eventually, in February 1984, authorities intervened. The Department of Social Services removed both children from the home, and shortly after, approached a married couple, Tim and Julie Tennant, about adopting the two siblings. Married for over a decade and unable to have biological children, Tim and Julie Tennant were overjoyed when they adopted 19-month-old Beth and her 7-month-old brother Jonathan. The children had been described to them as normal and healthy, and no mention was made of the trauma they had endured. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Soon after moving into their new home, Beth began displaying deeply disturbing behavior. As a toddler, she deliberately removed a nest of baby birds from a tree, despite Julie gently explaining that the mother wouldn't return if the nest was disturbed. Beth looked on blankly, then squeezed each baby bird to death with her bare hands. Her behavior toward her younger brother was even more alarming. She routinely hurt him and made no attempt to hide her desire to kill him. Beth also expressed a chilling wish to stab her adoptive parents while they slept. Ultimately, Beth Thomas was diagnosed with Reactive Attachment Disorder, RAD, a rare but severe psychological condition that arises in children who are unable to form healthy emotional bonds with caregivers, usually due to profound early trauma. RAD is typically only diagnosed in the most extreme cases. According to the Cleveland Clinic, the condition affects an estimated 1 to 2% of children, though the rate is believed to be significantly higher among those in the foster care system. Under the care of psychologist Dr. Ken McGidd, Beth began to slowly open up, revealing the full extent of the physical, emotional, and sexual abuse she had endured from her biological father. These revelations formed the foundation of the now infamous 1990 HBO documentary, Child of Rage. The film follows Beth through intensive therapy sessions as she struggles with RAD, providing the public with a rare and deeply unsettling glimpse into the psychological aftermath of extreme childhood trauma. Viewers were stunned by Beth's disturbing behavior and the chilling confessions captured in her therapy sessions. In one of the most unforgettable moments from the Child of Rage documentary, the doctor gently asks the 6-year-old how she would kill her adoptive parents. Beth, sitting calmly and expressionless, replies, "Stab them." She offers no remorse, no hesitation, just a flat, matter-of-fact answer that sent shockwaves through audiences. Even more disturbing than Beth's outward behavior was the dark history that lay beneath it, a history slowly uncovered through her therapy sessions. Both Beth and Jonathan had been brutally abused by their birth father, and the psychological scars ran deep. In one session, Dr. Magid gently questioned Beth about a recurring nightmare she had mentioned involving a violent man. Beth responded quietly, "I would be in the house upstairs. He comes up the stairs and hurts me." As the therapy progressed, it became heartbreakingly clear that the man in the nightmare wasn't a fictional boogeyman. It was her biological father. The dream was not just a symbol of fear, but a memory in disguise, replaying the trauma she had experienced before she was even old enough to understand it. This chilling revelation revealed the true source of Beth's rage and emotional detachment. Not inherent evil, but unimaginable early abuse. In 1992, just 2 years after the release of the HBO documentary, the story of Beth Thomas was adapted into a fictional made-for-TV movie, also titled Child of Rage. Loosely inspired by the real events, the film took major creative liberties, transforming Beth into Catherine, a child portrayed not just as emotionally detached, but as violently malevolent, manipulative, and even borderline demonic. The film leaned heavily into horror tropes: eerie silences, violent outbursts, sinister glares, and disturbing music that framed Catherine less as a victim and more as a threat. Though marketed as being based on a true story, the 1992 film sensationalized Beth's trauma for dramatic effect. The complex psychological roots of her behavior, years of abuse, neglect, and betrayal, were barely acknowledged. Instead, viewers were invited to be frightened by the child, not to understand her. Catherine became another entry in the long cinematic lineage of the evil child, alongside the bad seed and the omen. But unlike those characters, Beth Thomas was real. By fictionalizing her pain, the film effectively erased the humanity at the core of her story. It encouraged audiences to consume her trauma not as a tragedy, but as entertainment. And in doing so, it solidified a warped image of Beth in the cultural imagination, one that focused on her darkest moments and ignored the most important part of her story, her healing. After Beth Thomas completed her initial sessions with Dr. Ken Magid, he determined that although progress had been made, Beth still posed a danger to herself and others. Her emotional wounds ran deep, and she required more intensive, round-the-clock therapeutic care. As a result, Magid recommended that she be temporarily separated from her adoptive family in order to receive specialized treatment. Beth was placed under the care of Connell Watkins, a therapist known for her controversial and highly structured approach to behavioral modification. Watkins claimed to specialize in children with reactive attachment disorder and employed a method known as holding therapy, a confrontational treatment involving physically restraining children while they were encouraged, or sometimes forced, to express suppressed emotions. Though controversial even at the time, the method was promoted as a way to break through emotional walls in severely detached children. Watkins enforced an extremely strict regimen during Beth's treatment. Beth had to ask permission for even the most basic needs: eating, using the bathroom, or speaking. And she was locked in her room at night. The structure was harsh, designed to instill accountability and teach boundaries. Beth had to earn every privilege, slowly gaining trust from Watkins and her therapeutic staff. Though the methods were controversial and often criticized for being overly rigid or controlling, Beth began to respond. For the first time, she expressed genuine remorse for the pain she had caused her adoptive parents and her brother. She showed empathy, something that had once seemed unreachable. Beth never returned to live with the Tennant family. During the course of her treatment, she was readopted by a woman named Nancy Thomas, a therapeutic foster parent who worked closely with children diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder. Under Nancy's care, Beth continued to thrive. In time, she earned a degree in nursing from the University of Colorado, and in 2005 began working as a registered nurse in the neonatal ICU at Flagstaff Medical Center in Arizona, a powerful and poignant transformation for someone once considered incapable of emotional connection. Beth also began volunteering with Nancy's organization, Families by Design, which supports families raising adopted or foster children with trauma histories. In helping others, Beth not only reclaimed her future, she redefined her legacy. In 2001, Watkins, the therapist that helped Beth, was found guilty of negligent child abuse resulting in death following the tragic case of Candace Newmaker, a 10-year-old girl who died while undergoing a controversial rebirthing therapy session. The technique, a pseudoscientific form of attachment therapy, involved wrapping the child tightly in blankets and applying pressure with pillows to simulate the sensation of being born. The case sent shockwaves through the psychological and child welfare communities and brought national scrutiny to attachment-based therapies. The advocacy group Advocates for Children in Therapy has since denounced these methods and has specifically criticized both Beth Thomas and Nancy Thomas for continuing to support and promote variations of these controversial techniques. While Beth's recovery is remarkable, her association with a now widely discredited form of therapy continues to raise complex questions about the fine line between healing and harm. Even with the now controversy surrounding her therapy, there is no doubt that Beth Thomas was a resounding success and has helped others that have dealt with the same level of abuse. While the 1990 documentary Child of Rage and the subsequent made-for-TV movie of the same name brought attention to her story, the transformation of Beth into a fictional character like Catherine or the sensationalism of the documentary reflects a disturbing trend in media, the conversion of real trauma into horror entertainment. Rather than fostering a deeper understanding of mental health and child psychology, the 1992 film capitalized on the public's fear of the evil child archetype. In doing so, it dehumanized a real person. Beth Thomas, who went on to heal, become a nurse, and speak publicly about her recovery, was trapped in the public imagination as a symbol of childhood evil, not survival. This fictionalization also fed into a broader cultural obsession with damaged or dangerous children, a theme seen in horror films like The Omen, The Bad Seed, and Orphan. The fictional Child of Rage film didn't just reflect that trend, it reinforced it, making it harder for viewers to separate real psychological disorders from fictional malevolence. The journey from the 1990 documentary to the 1992 film adaptation of Child of Rage reveals the media's willingness to reshape tragedy into entertainment, even at the cost of truth and empathy. Beth Thomas's real-life suffering and eventual healing were overshadowed by a sensationalized, horror-inspired depiction that distorted public understanding. In turning a traumatized child into a fictional monster, the media not only failed Beth, it failed the public too. As consumers of true stories, we must learn to ask, are we seeking truth or just another scare?